Imagine surviving kidnappings, like plural.
Right.
Imagine surviving the absolute just brutality of abusive institutional lockups as a teenager. Navigating the streets of Los Angeles while homeless, surviving a shattered jaw, surviving stabbings.
It's just unimaginable for most of us.
Completely. And surviving the relentless grinding danger of addiction and the penal system on top of all that. I mean, you build an armor so thick that the world's sharpest edges just, bounce right off of you, become the ultimate survivor.
You have to, or you don't survive at all.
Exactly. But then a text message from a romantic partner, right, pulling away, saying they need space, and suddenly that impenetrable armor just evaporates.
It's completely gone.
You black out. You collapse to the floor, and you wake up with a bottle of liquor in one hand and a weapon in the other, feeling like you are literally going to die.
It sounds like a paradox, doesn't it? It sounds almost, well, impossible to reconcile those two realities residing within the exact same human body.
Right. I mean, how does a person who can walk through physical hell without even flinching suddenly get brought to their knees by a breakup?
It's wild.
It is. And that is the physiological mystery we are unpacking today. Welcome to a brand new deep dive. Today we are exploring a profoundly raw, intensely gripping set of notes from a book titled The Traumatized Addict's Guide to Heartbreak Recovery by Rocky Singh Kandola.
Such a powerful resource.
It really is. Now, I want to set the stage for you, the listener, right out of the gate here. What we're looking at today is not your typical sanitized self-help book. It's part high-stakes survival memoir, and it is part clinical-grade healing manual.
And, the distinction between a memoir and a clinical manual is incredibly important here.
Tell me more about that.
Well, the author isn't just recounting a tragedy for shock value, right? Though the events are, they're undeniably shocking. But he is documenting a visceral case study of the human nervous system. He's taking us into the literal engine room of trauma.
Exactly. And our mission today is to guide you through this astonishing life story, from unimaginable childhood abuse to adult addiction, but, we're not going to stop at the wreckage.
Right, because that's not the whole story.
No, it's not. We are going to extract the exact, practical, step-by-step blueprint the author created to rewire his own nervous system and finally find peace. We're going to explore how the environments I grew up in secretly wire our adult reactions.
Which is huge.
We'll look at why heartbreak can literally feel like a life or death biological threat, and most importantly, how you can apply these grounding tools to your own life, no matter what your past looks like.
Because the truth is, while the author's story is, on the extreme end of the spectrum, the biological mechanisms at play are universal.
Yeah, we all have a nervous system.
Exactly. We all have adaptive behaviors. We all have moments where our reactions are completely disproportionate to the present situation. We've all been there.
Think about it. If you're listening to this right now, think about a time someone you were dating just replied to a long, heartfelt text message with a simple K.
Oh, the dreaded K.
Right. Or maybe they just left you on red. Most of us go into a mild fight-or-flight response. Our heart rate spikes, our palms might sweat, we feel a knot in our stomach.
It's a physiological reaction.
Now take that universal human feeling and multiply it by 20 years of unhealed, compounded abandonment. That is what we are dealing with here. But before we get to the dramatic collapse in adulthood, we have to look at how the foundation was built, or more accurately, how it was cracked.
Yes. The genesis of trauma rarely looks like a cinematic explosion. It usually looks like a very quiet, very tense living room.
That gave me chills. Let's start right there. The author points out that his trauma didn't begin with the extreme abuse he faced later in life. It started from birth to about age 11 with 1,000 small, invisible cracks in a tense home.
Those micro moments.
Yeah. He describes his early home life as a place where love had conditions. And I really appreciate his nuance here because he doesn't paint his parents as these, mustache-twirling villains.
Right, it's rarely that simple.
He says they were just hurt people trying to raise a child while drowning in their own storms.
Wow. That phrase, drowning in their own storms, is a perfect distillation of intergenerational trauma. If we look at this through the lens of developmental psychology, a small child just does not have the capacity to objectively evaluate their caregivers.
They just absorb it all.
Entirely. A child absorbs the ambient energy of their environment completely, like a sponge in murky water. The author notes that anger lived right beneath the surface in his home. His father carried pride and control like a suit of armor, while his mother carried fear and exhaustion like shadows.
So if you're a 6-year-old kid living in that house, what does that actually feel like on a random Tuesday afternoon?
It feels like walking through a minefield blindfolded.
Yeah.
Your nervous system is constantly scanning the room like, is dad's jaw clenched? Is mom moving too quietly? The nervous system is adapting immediately to prioritize threat detection over relaxation.
Just constant hypervigilance. He writes about the impossible rules of his childhood, and this just broke my heart because you can see how inescapable it
That's a
is.
trap.
Yeah, imagine the unspoken rules of your survival are don't be too loud, don't be too emotional, don't take up too much space. So you try to shrink, you try to be invisible.
But that's only half of it.
Right, because simultaneously the rules are don't be weak, don't talk back, don't look scared. You have to be invisible, but also a flawless, unbothered gladiator.
It's a double bind. You literally cannot win. And when a child is placed in a double bind where every reaction is somehow wrong, they cannot rest.
They're just always on.
Let me break down why that is so dangerous neurologically. When a child's environment is consistently unpredictable, the amygdala, which is the brain's alarm system, it becomes hypersensitized.
Like a smoke detector that goes off when you're just making toast.
Exactly like that. It starts perceiving neutral stimuli as dangerous. The kid isn't just stressed, their brain architecture is fundamentally altering to expect danger at all times.
And he didn't have the words for this. Kids don't sit there and think, oh, my emotional needs aren't being met because my caregivers lack self-regulation skills.
No, of course not. They lacked the cognitive development for that kind of macro analysis. Instead, the child's brain turns inward.
They blame themselves.
Precisely. The child internalizes the chaos and forms a core false belief: there is something wrong with me. If I were better, quieter, stronger, or smarter, my parents wouldn't be drowning in these storms.
Man, that's heavy.
That is the first real invisible crack. The child believes they can earn a safe, unconditional love that the parents simply do not have the capacity to give.
It's like installing a faulty operating system in a brand-new computer. The hardware is fine, but the code running in the background says, you are the problem.
That's a great analogy.
And that belief just sits there. It festers. It becomes the lens through which he views the entire world. And then, well, we hit age 11.
The catalyst.
He calls this the wow moment. Though reading the notes, wow feels like the understatement of the century.
Truly.
One day, he is just a regular kid living in America. He's going to school, sleeping in his bed, living his life. The very next day, he is on an airplane to India. He is sent away, no warning, no preparation, no narrative explanation whatsoever. He is just packed up and exiled.
And he is very careful to clarify a specific point here, which is crucial. He says this was not a culture shock. Moving to a new country is a culture shock. What he experienced was an abandonment shock.
Okay, let me pause you there because I want to make sure we really understand this.
Yeah.
What is the difference, biologically speaking, between a stressful move and an abandonment shock?
It's a huge difference.
Because from the outside, an adult might say, well, kids get sent to boarding school or stay with relatives all the time. It's tough, but they adjust. Why is this so uniquely devastating?
It's a great question. And it all comes down to the presence or absence of a co-regulating narrative.
A co-regulating narrative, what's that?
So if parents sit a child down and say, we love you very much, but we are struggling right now. We are sending you to stay with family for your safety and education, and we will call you every Sunday, and you will come back next summer. Well, the child still experiences sadness, but the brain has a framework.
Right, there's a structure to it.
Exactly. The brain says, I am safe, I am loved, this is temporary.
But he didn't get that framework.
No. He got a void. He was just removed. And when a child is suddenly removed from their environment without emotional support or explanation, the nervous system drops into severe primal survival mode.
Just total panic.
The brain immediately associates love with profound instability. The body internalizes the belief love can disappear suddenly, entirely, and without warning.
So he's sitting on this plane, or he's landing in India, surrounded by unfamiliar sights and sounds and people. He literally doesn't have the vocabulary to explain what has just happened to him. How does a human body process an abandonment that the mind can't even articulate?
When the mind lacks the words, the body takes the score. The body expresses the trauma for them.
Like physical symptoms?
Yes. The author notes that this abandonment translated into intense somatic symptoms: stomach tightness, chronic confusion, a heavy blanket of shame, and this overwhelming physical sensation of being thrown away. His brain was desperately trying to answer a silent, screaming question: Why am I being sent away?
And because of that faulty operating system he installed back in the tense living room?
Precisely. The only logical answer a traumatized child's brain can produce is, I must not have been good enough to stay. That specific wound forms the seed of an anxious, disorganized attachment style.
Let's break that term down for the listener. Anxious, disorganized attachment styles. What does that actually look like in practice?
Well, attachment styles are essentially the blueprints for how we connect with others, formed in our earliest relationships. An anxious attachment means you are terrified of being abandoned, so you cling tightly.
Okay, makes sense. What about the disorganized part?
But disorganized attachment is even more chaotic. It means the very people you rely on for safety are also the source of your deepest terror.
Oh, wow.
So you crave connection desperately to feel safe, but the moment you get close to someone, your alarm bells ring, screaming that they're going to hurt you or leave you. It's a push-pull dynamic that leaves the person constantly exhausted. They're starving for love, but terrified to digest it.
That is tragic, and nobody around him in India knew this invisible war was happening inside him. He writes that he tried to act normal. He tried to fit in, to play the part of the good kid. But he describes feeling like a ghost, just hovering above his own body.
Just completely detached.
Yeah, he was completely disconnected from himself because being inside himself was just too painful.
Dissociation is the brain's ultimate circuit breaker. When the reality of abandonment is too painful to process, the brain literally dims the lights on conscious awareness. You check out.
So this foundational wound, the sudden inexplicable exile, it sets the stage. He eventually does return to America around age 12 or 13, but the damage is done. He doesn't feel safe. He feels like a stranger in his own house.
And understandably so.
Right. And the most heartbreaking part is that this profound instability was just the prequel, the training ground. Because what happens next is a chapter where his autonomy isn't just threatened, it is stripped away entirely.
Yes. When a child learns early on that the ground beneath them can crumble at any moment, they stop trusting the ground. They walk on eggshells. Yeah. But unfortunately for the author, the ground wasn't just going to crumble. It was going to fall away completely, dropping him into an absolute nightmare.
Yeah. The author refers to his life between the ages of 13 and 17 as hell on earth. And looking at the source material, looking at the historical reality of what he went through, that is not hyperbole. We are talking about the troubled teen industry.
A very dark chapter in mental health treatment.
At just 13 years old, he is kidnapped, snatched from his life without warning in the middle of the night, and taken across the border to a facility in Mexico called Casa by the Sea.
The contrast between the name Casa by the Sea, which, evokes images of a luxurious, serene wellness retreat, and the brutal reality of the institution is chilling. This wasn't therapy. As the author describes it, it was a prison disguised as a rehabilitation center.
It was institutionalized, systematized abuse. This wasn't just strict parenting. This was psychological and physical warfare against teenagers. Let's look at the specific details he shares.
They're harrowing.
He says kids were punished simply for making eye contact with the staff. They were punished for crying. They were punished for stepping even slightly out of line. He says he learned very quickly that his voice did not matter at all.
It was completely erased.
Yeah. He learned that danger could come from absolutely anyone at any time, and that the only true safety came from completely dissociating and shutting down all of his emotions.
Let me put my clinical hat on for a moment, because what he is describing is the rapid neurological adaptation to forced captivity. Often, when people hear about someone shutting down their emotions or becoming completely numb, they think of it as a personality flaw or a psychological failure.
Right, like they're broken.
Exactly. But it is the exact opposite.
Wait, so being completely emotionally numb is actually a success?
From a purely biological survival standpoint, absolutely. It is a brilliant, necessary survival strategy. Think of the brain as a highly sophisticated risk management system. When a developing teenage brain is placed in an environment where showing fear, sadness, or anger leads directly to physical punishment or isolation, the brain calculates the risk. It realizes expressing emotion threatens our survival. So it takes the emotional center of the brain offline. It shuts it down to protect the organism.
That makes total sense when you frame it like that.
Symptoms like chronic anxiety, extreme startle responses, and emotional numbness aren't signs of weakness. They are the body's way of surviving active warfare.
It's like the brain playing possum. If I look dead inside, the predator will lose interest and walk away.
Exactly. It's a freeze response locked in over months and years.
But the cruelty of his story doesn't end there. He survives Mexico, he makes it out, he gets older. But at age 16, heading into 17, the nightmare repeats itself. And this, for me, is the most terrifying part of the entire deep dive. The second, kidnapping.
Because the element of surprise is gone, but the helplessness remains.
Yes, he knew it could happen again. He was living in constant paranoia. He had actually prepared for it. He writes that he had a system. He put a heavy shelf against his bedroom door every night. He kept a hammer nearby. He kept a knife. He had his dog in the room. He had a full-blown tactical plan to defend himself in his own home.
The fact that a teenager felt he had to do that.
It's awful. But in the middle of the night, the men who came for him bypass it all. He wakes up and he's already in cuffs. But here is the detail that just stops you in your tracks.
This part is so hard to read.
As these strangers are dragging him out of his room, taking him away, he looks through the gap in the doorway. And he sees the whites of his parents' eyes. They were standing there. They were watching it happen. They were letting it happen again.
That specific visual, the whites of the parents' eyes in the dark, is a profound psychological fracture.
I just can't fathom it. Let me challenge you on this because I want to know how a brain recovers from that. How does a 16-year-old ever trust the ground they walk on after seeing that? The very people biologically wired to protect you from the monsters are the ones opening the front door and inviting the monsters inside.
The short answer is they don't. They don't trust the ground ever again. This is a textbook, albeit extreme, example of a concept called trauma stacking.
Trauma stacking. Okay, explain how that works compared to just a single traumatic event.
Think of a single traumatic event, like a severe car accident, as a heavy weight dropped on a bridge. The bridge shakes, maybe a cable snaps, but the structure holds, and eventually it can be repaired.
Right.
Trauma stacking is when you drop that weight, and before the bridge can even stop vibrating, you drop another, and another, and another. The foundational wound was the abandonment in India. The second weight was the abuse in Mexico. The third weight was the realization that his preparations, his hammer, his shelf, were utterly useless.
And the final weight.
The final crushing weight that breaks the bridge entirely is seeing his parents watch him be taken.
The ultimate betrayal.
Exactly. The author learns deep in his nervous system, not just in his mind, but in his bones, his muscles, his vagus nerve. No one is coming to save me. Not my strength, not my weapons, and certainly not the people who claim to love me. I am completely, utterly on my own in a hostile universe.
And if you're listening to this, imagine carrying that belief into every interaction you have for the rest of your life. And to make matters worse, because somehow it gets worse, the facility he is dragged to this second time is called the Academy at Ivy Ridge in New York, and it is run by a man named Jason Finlinson.
This detail is almost too perfectly cruel to be real.
It sounds like fiction. Jason Finlinson isn't just a random strict administrator. This is the exact same man who had physically abused him, kicked him down a hallway, and hogtied him years earlier at another facility in the troubled teen industry network.
Unbelievable.
His parents, unknowingly or not, essentially paid to hand their son directly back to his abuser.
When trauma stacks like this inside a teenage body, the nervous system locks permanently into fight or flight mode. There is no baseline of safety anymore. Emotional regulation breaks apart completely. The author explicitly points out in his notes that this exact period, this specific betrayal, is where his adult romantic patterns were born.
How so? Like, what is the link between being locked in Ivy Ridge and his later relationships?
Because when you are trapped in that level of danger and betrayal, you stop believing in the concept of stability. If parents can betray you, anyone can. If a safe bedroom can become a kidnapping site, nowhere is safe.
Right, the floor could drop at any second.
So when he eventually enters adult relationships, his brain is constantly scanning for the inevitable betrayal. He is waiting for the floor to drop. And ironically, the desperate attempt to prevent the floor from dropping often causes the exact chaos that destroys the relationship.
So we have a 17-year-old kid. He's been exiled to India, locked in a Mexican facility, kidnapped from his own bed, and handed back to his abuser in New York. Releasing a hyper-traumatized 17-year-old into the real world is like dropping a soldier straight from an active, brutal war zone into a college dorm.
There's no transition.
He writes that he walked out into the world with no roadmap, no emotional tools, and no stable version of himself. But all that adrenaline, all that rage, all that terror, well, it had to go somewhere. Which brings us to the wreckage of his adulthood in his 20s and 30s.
When you enter adulthood carrying the weight of a war you never enlisted in, your reactions to normal everyday life events are going to be fundamentally altered. To a traumatized brain, peace feels dangerous. Chaos feels familiar. And love, well, love doesn't feel like a partnership. Love feels like a rescue mission.
Let's talk about the split identity he developed to cope with this. Because he couldn't just be one person. The trauma demanded a
It
fracture.
was a survival mechanism.
On one hand, you have the identity he calls the independent survivor. This is the guy who looks unbreakable from the outside. He hustles. He builds businesses from scratch. He survives doing time in prison. He navigates being homeless on the incredibly dangerous streets of Los Angeles.
Very capable in extreme situations.
Very. He survives having his jaw literally shattered. He survives stabbings. He is a machine of resilience. But on the other hand, running parallel to this machine is the identity he calls the desperate romantic. This is the part of him that sought absolute, total salvation in women.
It's a fascinating contradiction to look at, but neurologically it is completely sound. The brain compartmentalizes to survive. The survivor identity is tasked with handling the external world, the physical threats, the money, the logistics, the violence. It is an armor made of pure adrenaline.
And the other side.
But the romantic identity, that isn't an adult man. That is the unhealed 11-year-old boy who was put on a plane to India.
Yeah.
That is the terrified 13-year-old in Mexico. The romantic is just the inner child, desperately trying to find a home, a place to belong, someone who will finally look at him and say, I will not abandon you.
We see this play out so vividly in a story he shares about a girl named Komal. He is 20 years old, he's deep in his survivor hustle, but he is completely consumed by her. He drives 28 hours straight just to surprise her. They have this intense whirlwind connection.
Which feels like salvation to that inner child.
But then, abruptly, while sitting in a car, she ends it. She tells him she needs other experiences. She's young, it makes sense. But for him, the reaction is catastrophic. He blacks out. He loses time.
His system crashes.
He wakes up on the floor of a house in White Plains, New York, with a bottle of Crown Royal in one hand and a friend's gun in the other. He writes in his notes, and this line really stuck with me, not a dramatic cry for help, but 20 years of accumulation. It wasn't just Komal breaking up with him. It was every single door that had ever closed on him, slamming shut all at once.
This is perhaps the most important psychological concept in the entire source material. Let's really explore this. It's what we can call the 10x heartbreak effect.
The 10x heartbreak effect. Okay, if I'm a listener, and I've been through a bad breakup where I couldn't get out of bed for a week, how is this different?
It's a difference in biological translation. When a relatively neurotypical adult experiences a breakup, the adult mind rationally processes the event. It hurts, there is grief, there is a mourning period, but the brain says, this is a breakup, it is sad, but people move on, I will survive. But for someone with the author's trauma history, the inner child's nervous system does not hear the words, I think we should see other people. The inner child's nervous system screams, I am being abandoned in India again. I am being locked in Casa by the sea again. The predators are coming and I am defenseless. Wow. The physiological collapse, the blacking out, the suicidal ideation, it isn't actually about Komal leaving. Komal is just the trigger pulling the alarm. The pain is the original massive childhood wound violently ripping open.
That makes so much sense. That completely explains the paradox we talked about at the beginning. He could survive prison, he could survive homelessness, he could survive a shattered jaw, because those were physical threats. The independent survivor knew exactly how to fight physical threats.
Exactly. Physical threats have clear physical solutions.
But a text message pulling away, a girl saying, I need space in a car, that bypassed the survivor armor completely and struck the unhealed 11-year-old boy right in the chest.
Exactly. The armor doesn't protect against emotional abandonment. And because he was seeking safety in external partners rather than generating it internally, he was caught in a doom loop. He consistently chose partners who couldn't stay, or he subconsciously sabotaged healthy connections through his own hypervigilance and desperate clinging.
He was trying to get a drink of water from a mirage, but there was a massive turning point in his mid-20s, age 25. He is deep in the pill game, making illegal money, living completely chaotically. His father, the man whose disappointment and anger he had feared his entire life, the man who had let him be taken in the night, comes to him.
A pivotal encounter.
And his father says, pick any country in the world, I'll pay for it, just go. And for the very first time in his entire life, no one forced him into a car, no one kidnapped him, no one tricked him. He chose to go back to India.
That element of free choice cannot be overstated. Trauma, at its very core, is fundamentally about a total loss of power and control. Is something terrible happening to you against your will.
Right, you have no say.
By standing there at 25 and actively choosing his own destination, choosing to return to the site of his original abandonment, he took the very first step towards self-leadership. He reclaimed agency.
It's a beautiful moment of agency. But as we see in the text, the romantic wreckage was far from over. Healing isn't linear. He gets married to a woman named Hanukkah. He stands at the altar terrified to lose her, openly acknowledging in his notes that fear is a terrible reason to get married.
It never works as a foundation.
And his fear is realized. She eventually leaves him just 3 days after getting her green card.
Another massive abandonment. Another validation of his core fear.
And his reaction is pure panic. He literally sprints through Los Angeles International Airport, LAX, begging the TSA agents to stop her plane. It's a movie scene, but it's a tragedy. That heartbreak leads to a spiral where he ends up living homeless in a minivan.
Just devastating.
Later, he builds himself back up, gets into another relationship with a woman named Trina, and Trina betrays him on her own birthday to go to Hawaii with another man. It's just blow after blow after blow.
The bridge is taking hit after hit.
And finally, a woman named Ruby. Ruby is the final straw. He is 39 years old. He is in a hotel room in Chiang Mai, Thailand. He is shaking from substance withdrawal, completely gutted by another heartbreak, physically and spiritually bankrupted. But this time, well, he finally stops running.
That hotel room in Chiang Mai is the crucible of this entire story. He is completely stripped down to the studs. There are no substances to numb the pain. There is no partner to project his need for safety onto. There are no external distractions, no businesses to build, no hustles to run.
Just him.
It is just him, alone in a room with the accumulated screaming trauma of 39 years. And this is the exact moment where the source material pivots remarkably. It shifts from a harrowing memoir of survival into a highly specific, actionable manual for rewiring the human body and nervous system.
Which brings us to the payoff of this deep dive, the nervous system manual. If you are listening to this and wondering, okay, this story is wild, but how do I actually use this? This is for you. The overarching theme of his method is regulation over intensity. When he was in Chiang Mai, he quit weed. He quit all substances. He entered a phase he calls the sobriety window. He removed his emotional anesthetic.
Hardest part.
And I want you to guess what happened next. Did he feel an immediate sense of zen? Did a white light wash over him?
Far from it. He entered a chaotic reboot mode.
Exactly. All the old trauma, decades of terror and abandonment just rushed to the surface because there is absolutely nothing keeping it pushed down anymore.
I am so glad he documented this, because this is a critical phase of healing that society deeply misunderstands.
Yeah, how so?
Well, people think getting sober or starting therapy or beginning a healing journey should feel immediately peaceful. I'm doing the right thing. I should feel better.
Right, like an instant fix.
But when you remove the numbing agent, whether that's alcohol, weed, doom scrolling on your phone, or obsessively pursuing romantic partners, the body finally feels safe enough to process the backlog of terror. It feels like an absolute crisis. It feels like you are getting worse. But it's actually the nervous system trying to clear the cache.
So how do you survive the cache clearing without losing your mind? Because in that hotel room, he was having massive panic attacks. To survive this, he had to develop physical emergency tools. He realized you cannot outthink a panic attack. One of the primary tools he created is called the 12-second reset.
Such a powerful technique.
When you are in full panic, logic is offline. You can't just tell yourself, hey, calm down, it's just a breakup. So his method is purely physical. He suggests splashing freezing cold water on your face and then immediately placing your warm hands firmly on your throat and chest.
It is so simple, but the science underlying that action is elegant and profound. Let's break down exactly why this works, because it's not a placebo. The freezing cold water triggers something called the mammalian dive reflex.
Okay, let's unpack that. The mammalian dive reflex. What is that, evolutionarily speaking?
It's an evolutionary trait found in all mammals, designed to conserve oxygen when submerging in freezing water. When cold water hits the receptors on your face, particularly around the nose and eyes, your brain instantly thinks, we are diving deep underwater.
Oh, wow.
It immediately overrides your conscious control and forces your heart rate to plummet. It constricts blood vessels to prioritize oxygen to the brain and heart. It instantly shocks the sympathetic nervous system, which is your fight or flight response, and forces it to power down.
Wow, so it's like a hard biological override button.
Yes, you are using an ancient evolutionary mechanism to short-circuit a modern psychological panic attack.
Yeah.
But he doesn't stop there. After the cold water, he places warm, gentle pressure on his throat and chest. This targets the vagus nerve.
The vagus nerve gets talked about a lot these days in wellness circles, but usually without much explanation. How does putting your hands on your throat help?
Think of the vagus nerve as the massive fiber optic information highway running from your gut through your chest and throat directly up into your brain.
Okay.
It constantly scans your internal organs and reports back to the brain on your state of safety. By applying warm, gentle, steady pressure to the throat and chest, you are physically stimulating that nerve. You are sending a manual signal up the fiber optic cable that says, "We are safe. We are being held." This activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and digest mode.
That is incredible. So instead of trying to use willpower to stop a panic attack, which never works, you are just pressing the right biological buttons. Cold water to stop the alarm, warm touch to restart the calming system.
Biology over willpower. Every single time.
Okay, so you stop the immediate panic, but what about the lingering anxiety? Another tool he outlines, which I found fascinating and honestly intimidating, is his micro-tolerance practice. He refers to this as emotional weightlifting.
It's a great metaphor.
Here is the exercise. You pick one uncomfortable emotion that you are currently feeling. Let's say it's profound loneliness or a spike of fear, and you just sit with it for exactly 90 seconds. You don't try to fix it. You don't pick up your phone to distract yourself. You don't smoke weed. You don't call an ex. You just sit in the fire of that emotion for 90 seconds.
This sounds incredibly easy, doesn't it? Just sit still for a minute and a half.
It sounds like torture. If I'm a listener, the friction of actually doing this in the moment seems impossible. When I feel anxious, my brain screams at me to do something. Check email, open Instagram, eat a snack. Sitting with it feels counterintuitive.
It feels counterintuitive because our modern society is built entirely around avoiding friction and discomfort. But what's fascinating here is the core philosophy underlying the practice. You cannot heal with intensity. You heal with regulation.
Which goes against everything he used to do.
Right. For his entire life, the author tried to outrun his pain by running miles, working obsessively, chasing chaotic relationships, and living in extreme highs and lows. But a traumatized nervous system does not need more adrenaline, even if it's good adrenaline like an intense workout or passionate romance. A traumatized nervous system needs slow, boring, predictable rhythms to finally believe that the environment is actually safe.
Boring is the medicine.
Boring is the medicine. By sitting with the discomfort for 90 seconds, you are proving to your amygdala that you will not die from an emotion. An emotion is just a wave of neurochemicals. It peaks and then it washes out. If you constantly interrupt the wave with distractions, the brain never learns that the wave is harmless.
That leads directly to the larger framework of his life now, his 24-hour trauma-stable routine. Because his childhood was violently unpredictable, kidnappings in the night, sudden flights to India, well, predictability is now a non-negotiable anchor.
Routine is safety.
He relies on slow mornings. No rushing, no immediate phone checking. He uses intentional grounding touch throughout the day, like a hand on the chest, to send a continuous signal of safety. And he enforces a strict, non-negotiable nighttime wind-down to signal to his brain that the day is over and no one is coming to take him.
So much of trauma recovery is about repetition. You are literally reparenting your biology. You are providing the predictable, safe environment for your nervous system today that your parents failed to provide for you decades ago.
Yeah.
You're proving to your body, day after day, that the war is actually over.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? I think we often fall into the trap of believing that healing should be this massive cinematic breakthrough. We think we'll go to a retreat, cry on a mountaintop, have an epiphany, and suddenly we are fixed. But here, someone who has been to the absolute extremes of human suffering is telling us that healing is actually incredibly mundane.
It's in the small moments.
It's drinking a glass of water, it's splashing cold water on your face, it's putting your hand on your own chest, it's sitting still for 90 seconds.
Slow healing is the fastest healing.
But the physical regulation is only phase one. Once the biological alarm bells are finally quieted down, and only then, the deep psychological work can actually begin. Which brings us to the final and perhaps most profound section of the source material, the Rocky method and inner reparenting.
This is where the physical meets the psychological. For decades, his internal world was a war zone. The adult self was essentially missing in action, leaving the hypervigilant survivor identity to constantly fight off threats, while the wounded inner children constantly panicked in the background. His concept of integration is about the adult self finally stepping up to take the wheel. The adult becomes the protector, so the exhausted survivor can finally retire and the children can finally rest.
He identifies 3 specific inner children within himself, each holding a different traumatic burden. There's the 8-year-old. This is the kid who lived in the tense house, who tried so desperately to be perfect, quiet, and good, just to earn a shred of love and stop the parents from fighting.
The one trying to be invisible.
Yeah. Then there's the 11-year-old. This is the boy who was put on the plane to India, the boy who feels fundamentally unlovable and abandoned. And finally, there's the 14-year-old. This is the teenager who was locked in casa by the sea in Mexico, who believes the entire world is dangerous, violent, and out to get him.
It's a brilliant way to map the psyche. Instead of just feeling a vague sense of anxiety, he can pinpoint exactly which part of his history is being triggered in the present moment.
To integrate these fragmented parts of himself, he outlines a 5-step daily reparenting practice. And I want to walk the listener through this because you can do this today. First, you check in with your physical body and name 2 physical sensations. Maybe it's a tight jaw and a fluttery stomach.
Bringing it back to the body.
Second, you identify which specific inner child is currently active. If you feel rejected by a text message, is that the 11-year-old feeling abandoned? If your boss yells at you, is that the 14-year-old feeling terrified of authority?
You're isolating the trigger.
Exactly. Third, you vividly visualize that younger version of yourself in your mind. You picture them at that exact age. And fourth, and this is the emotional core of the practice, you speak directly to them.
The words he uses here are so simple, but mathematically precise for a traumatized brain.
He says, I see you. I know you're scared. I won't leave you. You are safe with me now.
Think about what those specific words accomplish. I see you counters the invisibility he felt in his tense childhood home. I know you're scared validates the emotion, countering the rule that he wasn't allowed to show fear.
Wow.
I won't leave you directly addresses the abandonment shock of India. And you are safe with me now addresses the physical terror of Mexico and Ivy Ridge.
It's incredible. He had to become the exact perfect protective father figure he was so desperate for when he was a kid. He had to build the safe home inside his own mind that he never had physically. Let me ask you this, as an expert, why does talking to an imagined younger version of yourself actually work? Isn't it just playing make-believe?
It's not make-believe, it's narrative restructuring. The human brain makes sense of the world through stories. Trauma disrupts the narrative timeline. It makes the past feel like it is happening right now.
Like you're reliving it.
Yes. When you visualize the inner child and speak to them from the perspective of the capable adult, you are creating a timeline. You are telling the brain, that happened back then to him, but I am here now and I am capable of handling this. It moves the traumatic memory out of the present tense amygdala and into the past tense hippocampus, where it can be properly stored as a memory rather than an active threat.
This connects beautifully to what he calls his 5 laws of inner transformation. He really emphasizes 2 of them in particular. Law 1, pain is the signal, not the enemy. And Law 5, you don't heal when you feel safe, you heal when you feel seen.
You heal when you feel seen. That is profound. For his entire life, he tried to feel safe by building armor, making money, controlling his environment. But true healing didn't happen until the adult man finally turned inward and saw the pain of the 11-year-old boy.
It's about facing it.
When you stop running from the pain and actually sit with it, the trauma stops driving the bus. Healing isn't about forgetting the past. It's not about erasing the scars. It's realizing that the pain is a chapter in your story, but it's no longer the author of your future. The adult man learns to hold the wounded boy.
Okay, let's take a collective breath. Because we have journeyed through an incredibly intense, harrowing, but ultimately triumphant deep dive today. We tracked a story from the quiet, tense rooms of a childhood home, through the terrifying halls of abusive teen institutions, into the absolute chaos of adult addiction and devastating heartbreak.
It's a lot to process.
It is, but we didn't stop there. We watched a man strip himself down to nothing in a hotel room in Chiang Mai and slowly, meticulously learn to regulate his own nervous system. We watched him become his own safe home and in doing so break a massive cycle of generational trauma.
The transformation from a life dedicated entirely to mere survival to a life of true expansion, self-leadership, and purpose is remarkable. He stopped running from his ghosts. He turned around, faced them, and offered them compassion.
And for you, listening right now, I want to make this deeply personal. Whether you have lived through extreme cinematic trauma like the author, kidnappings, violence, addiction, or if you just struggle with the quiet, persistent fear of being left alone, or the agonizing, gut-wrenching sting of a breakup that you know you shouldn't be this upset over.
This blueprint applies to you.
The mechanisms are the same. Slowing down, activating your vagus nerve, refusing to distract yourself from uncomfortable feelings, identifying the wounded parts of yourself, and making a solemn vow to never, ever abandon yourself again. These are not just trauma tools. These are the universal tools of reclaiming your own life.
They are the tools that allow you to move from reacting to the world to actually living in it.
Exactly. I want to leave you with one final provocative thought today, drawn directly from the spirit of the author's integration phase. Think back to all the terrible things that have happened to you, the rejections, the failures, the moments where you felt utterly broken and thrown away.
We all have them.
What if the very things that caused those invisible cracks? What if the things that almost destroyed you are the exact things that make you uniquely powerful today? What if your story, with all of its messy, painful, unpredictable, and heartbreaking chapters, isn't a stain on your life? What if it is the exact medicine you are meant to offer the world? Take a moment today. Try it. Just sit in total stillness for 90 seconds. Don't look at your phone. Don't run. And see what wisdom rises up when you finally stop running.